I'll start this one by saying I'm in a bit of a bad mood, so if that leaks through to some of my arguments, well, shit happens. But I've chosen this video for a reason, so let's continue with this suited and booted bastard waffling on about victim blaming, while I point out exactly why he's wrong.
I'd like to discuss with you the phenomenon that we call blaming the victim.
Yes, I'm very familiar with the social justice propagated fallacy of victim blaming. What's your point?
And as a starting point, I have to point out
This is a trigger warning. I'm going to track you down and personally confiscate your balls.
that the consequences, the adverse effects of crime are usually much more severe than the victim would have anticipated.
Oh good, it's not. I don't think either of us were looking forward to that. So what you're saying is we can't ask the victims of crimes questions because it might make them sad. Oh, isn't that a fucking shame? I imagine you wouldn't mind asking probing questions if it helped put the accused away. But God forbid you press them for details to make sure that it's consistent and accurate and not entirely made up.
And the victim, therefore, would expect some sympathy and some empathy by the bystanders and by family and by officials running the criminal justice system.
Oh, would they like a nice hug and a foot rub as well? Maybe a cat to cuddle with while you ask them the questions? Or is simply having the judicial system bend over for them enough? And you mentioned bystanders giving them sympathy. Why the fuck would a bystander give sympathy? If you've been the victim of a crime, sure, that sucks, I'm sorry for you, but if you expect sympathy from bystanders, then you'll get no sympathy from me.
But the opposite is quite often the case.
Oh, you have some proof of this, right? Please, for the sake of my fucking sanity, and for the future of the entire human race, that you, a professor for this law school, are presenting evidence. Because if you don't, who the fuck else will?
And in actual reality, many victims are faced with a lot of questions.
That is kind of the backbone to running an investigation. Are you completely sure that you're not the cleaner? I mean, what's the alternative to asking questions? I'll just point to who you're accusing and we'll beat a confession out of them. Or better yet, we could just cut out the middleman and send them straight to the slammer.
And these questions are perceived to be quite hostile by the victim.
I don't give a fuck how the questions are perceived. Do they not want to give up the information, which on its own is very suspicious? Do they not want to give the police the best chance at catching this person you're accusing of a crime?
Because the nature of the question is to allocate blame.
Hold the fucking headlines. Are you saying, and I want to make this clear, that they're questioning the victim, hoping to allocate some kind of blame to somebody for this crime? Outstanding. That's why you're the professor.
On the part of the victim. So the standard example, of course, is the rape victim reporting the crime and the officer taking down the report, asking the woman, well, why were you on the street late that night? Or why were you dressed so scarcely?
That is absolutely not true, and you should be ashamed of yourself for attempting to mislead people into thinking it is true. Not only are you deterring legitimate victims from coming forward because they've propagated this myth they're going to be spoken to like they're completely at fault, but you're ruining the justice system so it becomes easier for liars to see their victims put in jail. Because the police are far too scared to ask the questions that need to be asked for fear of their own jobs. And the only time you will ever hear police say, well, why were you in this particular location this late at night, is if it was somewhere they were unlikely to be, like the workplace after hours, or somewhere they shouldn't have been, say a restricted area.
And now that's an obsolete example.
Yeah, no shit, detective.
But the same thing happens in all kinds of crime, where the officials actually seek factors which put the blame for the victimization on the victim.
Like how somebody accuses someone of a crime they didn't commit, which is my case at the minute. This example is somewhat anecdotal as I can't present any evidence here and now for you, but it's an example nonetheless. I'm accused of committing a crime. I didn't commit the crime. Even the police said it's unlikely I committed the crime, because the guy seems shifty, like he's out to try and exploit some kind of insurance money. But they have to see it all through anyway, which is fair enough. But when it is all done and dusted, even if I get off completely scot-free, he will not be charged with wasting police time. When I asked why, the police officer told me we can't be seen to be victim blaming. Even if they know the victim, I use that word loosely, in a case is lying, they can't do anything about it. That person would get off completely scot-free, and the next person they come across to extort some kind of compensation might be much less capable of defending his position than I am. It offers absolutely no deterrent, and I think actually encourages people to use the legal system as a weapon, because there is absolutely no risk of any backlash, and that is thanks to the work of social justice warriors.
And why is that? We've tried to understand that.
You mean, why would the police investigate every single possibility? You know, rather than just taking an allegation on faith. Because that's their job, fuckwit.
And it is because all of us, including criminal justice officials, try to believe in a just world.
Personally, I don't think anybody is that stupid. The wool completely sew over their eyes, they walk around in a daydream thinking all is good with the world. Wouldn't it help that perfect world vision of yours if people didn't use the justice system as a weapon to forward their own agenda?
And in a just world, people who behave in a normal way will not be subject to crime.
That is an exceptionally retarded thing you have just said. I'm starting to think you've just stolen that suit off somebody and turned up. Normal people, whatever the fuck that means, won't be subject to crime. I honestly don't think you have much of a handle on this law business. Crimes are more often than not committed against the general public. These are the normal people I assume you're referencing. So you asserting that the people who are victims of crime aren't normal, but they themselves must be involved in some kind of nefarious activities.
So if someone is victimized, there must be, and they are trying to look for, some way of attributing the crime to the victim.
Oh, I see your angle now. But your entire argument is based on people thinking that crimes only happen to criminals, which is absolute bullshit. Anybody with their feet firmly on planet Earth will know that's not the case. I'd be willing to wager that the majority of people in the general public have been the victim of some kind of crime, no matter how minor, so they know that it can happen to anybody, and that it doesn't take a criminal to be the victim of a criminal. 80-year-old Mrs. Norris wasn't targeted by a burglar because she was a fucking cannibal. No, she was targeted because she's 80, can't defend her property, and some fucking scumbags saw an opportunity. And I can promise you that there is no victim blaming going on in a case as black and white as that one.
And as long as we, as researchers, as practitioners, as we are aware of this psychological mechanism of self-defense.
It's all well and good knowing something like this could take place, and the people who deal with the victims may have to be careful with how they say things, but if there are extenuating circumstances, then no questions should be off the table.
In order to preserve your own peace of mind, then we can actually change our behavior.
No, frankly, nobody should have to go out of their way to change their behaviour just to accommodate somebody overly sensitive. If you actually are a victim, then yeah, that's horrible. Sorry that happened to you. But riddle me this. Would you rather not get asked the hard questions and have to deal with the knowledge that whoever did the crime against you is still out there? Or get asked the hard questions and have the satisfaction of knowing that the person who wronged you is rotting in a jail cell? I understand it's not always as black and white as that. But, given his video provides no evidence or sources, something I'm very disappointed with, by the way, especially from a professor of law.
And show much more understanding and much more empathy for the victims who deserve our sympathy, who deserve our respect.
So what you're saying is if somebody makes an allegation, we should immediately wrap them in cotton wool and not ask any probing questions. Okay, I've got it now. And just so we're clear, nobody deserves sympathy and respect just for being a victim. People can choose to exhibit this towards them, but that's their choice. But you don't have a right to it. You can't control how I or anybody else feels towards somebody else. And to attempt to police emotion like that is distasteful to say the least. It's that kind of politically correct dogma that ties the hands of police officers that actually want justice, which makes actual victims much less likely to get that justice. And frankly, you should be ashamed of yourself. You've failed not only as a law professor, but a man and a human being. And as always, thank you for your time.